Welcome. Open your mind, your body, and your soul. Immerse yourself as you drift deeper into the sound. Here is your guide for this journey.
Great start. The future has finally arrived. Yes, it is different than we all thought. But don't worry, it just means your future hasn't been written yet. No one's has. Your future is whatever you make it. So make it a good one.
Thank you and good evening. The sponsor has been identified, but unlike most television programs, the performer hasn't been provided with a script. As a matter of fact, I have been permitted to choose my own words and discuss my own ideas regarding the choice that we face in the next few weeks. I have spent most of my life as a Democrat. I recently have seen fit to follow another course. I believe that the issues confronting us cross party lines. Now, one side in this campaign has been telling us that the issues of this election are the maintenance of peace and prosperity. The line has been used, we've never had it so good. But I have an uncomfortable feeling that this prosperity isn't something on which we can base our hopes for the future. No nation in history has ever survived a tax burden that reached a third of its national income. Today, 37 cents out of every dollar earned in this country is the tax collector's share. And yet our government continues to spend $17 million a day more than the government takes in. We haven't balanced our budget 28 out of the last 34 years. We've raised our debt limit 3 times in the last 12 months. And now our national debt is 1.5 times bigger than all the combined debts of all the nations of the world. We have $15 billion in gold in our treasury. We don't own an ounce. Foreign dollar claims are $27.3 billion. And we've just had announced that the dollar of 1939 will now purchase 45 cents. In its total value.
I wasn't prepared to translate that as I was doing that little tease.
Oh, that's
that little
right.
mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At.
See, that's what I said. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard it.
Around.
I'd never heard it said. I'd always seen the mark, but never heard it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
Yeah, I heard around or about in the lunchroom the other
See,
week.
there it is. Violence at NBC. GE.com. I mean.
Well, Allison should know. What do you
is
think
internet
that, Allison?
anyway? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate with. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
Oh, Allison will be in the studio shortly.
What does
it mean?
It's a giant computer network made up of started from
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us what this was.
It's like
You've
a
been looking in the
computer
dictionary.
billboard.
It's not an. It's a computer billboard, but it's
Right.
nationwide. It's several universities that are all joined together.
Right.
And others can access it.
Right.
And it's getting bigger and bigger all the time.
It
Just
came in
great.
really handy during the quake. A lot of people, that's how they were communicating out to tell family and loved ones they were okay because all the phone lines were down.
I was telling Katie and I was
But you don't need that. You don't need a phone line to operate internet.
People just getting on to the internet because they feel that they have to get onto the playing field, so to speak.
But it's very hip to be on the internet right now.
Just what is this main artery of the information superhighway?
Every business, no matter how large, no matter how small, will be on the internet in the year 2000.
Millions of Americans own a personal computer. If you're one of them, you can now glimpse the future with nothing more than a modem, a phone line, and a few dollars a month.
I grew up actually in the Midwest in Kansas, and I explain to people that when my mom asks me what I do, I say, Mom, we sell software to banks.
Pretty simple.
Pretty straightforward, not a lot of drama about that. The fact that the software we're selling includes components of blockchain technologies, includes solutions that leverage digital assets. These are profound technologies and I think can impact lots of industries in lots of ways. I think with Ripple, we were clear about what problem and how we were going to apply this technology. One of the first things I did when I joined Ripple, there were a number of different projects going on. We had CODIUS, which is a smart contract platform. We had something called Global Identity, which was intended to be leveraging a blockchain, leveraging the XRP ledger for identity management. And there's this payments solution.
And if you look at the system that we developed, if you look at the XRP ledger's mechanics, it provides all of those assurances. It does it in a somewhat different way than Bitcoin does, but it provides those exact same assurances. And it's not vulnerable to problems like a majority attack. It has a higher transaction rate. For the use case that we're targeting, for settling international payments, for sort of being a connector between different assets, it meets the requirements of the use case. There's a separation between Ripple, the company, and the XRP ledger, the sort of decentralized transaction processing system. We've carefully designed that token, that processing system, that ledger, so that it doesn't have administrative functions. Just like Bitcoin, every node verifies every single transaction. You don't need anybody else to tell you if a transaction is valid. If you look at the technology, the only problem that you can't trivially solve in a fully decentralized way, there's only one. Like every problem that you can imagine is trivial to fully solve in a decentralized way, but one. And that problem is, what do you do if you receive two valid transactions that conflict at about the same time? That's the only, what do we need mining for? Well, it does the distribution of the asset, but if we didn't need it for the distribution of the asset, the only reason we would need it is to solve the double spend problem. And so we have a way of solving that problem that people can argue is not, it doesn't have the properties that they like from Bitcoin, but it doesn't cost millions of dollars a day. It can handle more than 1,000 transactions per second instead of, maybe a couple of hundred.
On the XRPL, on the XRP ledger, they all come together in a great way. It's easy to set up, it's easy to maintain, it's easy to get started, and it's fast and cheap. We're talking about settlement within 4 seconds. That's the kind of time a consumer is willing to wait for confirmation.
Digital assets, and certainly we work on and advocate for digital assets. XRP is the one that we've really gotten behind. That's really just a subset of a much bigger thing happening. And so really I think you're leading into a world where there'll be complete interoperability between all the money systems, ledgers, and that's really what's missing today. So for example, we all know, wealthy people, people in developing countries. We can't even really send $50 to Europe without it being all chewed up in fees. That's clearly a problem. Much bigger problem is the 2 billion people living in the developing world who need, according to the Gates Foundation, need to be able to send 50 cents to really be participants in the global economy. You can't do that in a system that's run by SWIFT and correspondent banking, where we all know it might take 3 days to move value between countries, and where there's high failure rates and the costs are very high. So, we've been in the money world, we're living in a pre-internet world where, before we had email, it was very expensive to communicate. Imagine sending letters, nobody does that anymore. Using SWIFT is like sending a letter. When you dropped it in the mailbox, you have no idea where it is, if it got there or not. So getting away from that, I think, is profound. And what we would say is that, a lot of the backlash on globalization today, it's not because globalization is bad, it's essential. It's that it's incomplete, because globalization needs kind of 3 key systems to be working together, and it needs interoperability and data. Check that one. We've had that since the internet IP, 25 years now. You need interoperability in goods. We've had that since the 50s with the shipping container. We've talked about shipping. We love shipping containers.
We're going to come back to that.
That was key. But you don't have it yet in money. And you need data, goods, and money to all be globally operating. And that's coming.
We're going to change the world. And I want to point out that changing the world doesn't have to be this huge thing, right? Like, we don't have to be like, okay, I'm going to change the world. You can be like, I'm going to change this little part of the world, this itty bitty little singular experience. I'm going to make this better. And collectively, all of these little tiny events that are improving the world, that are making it better, that are making it more decentralized, that's what's going to end up having a lasting impact on the larger world and the systems that we're using. You guys may be thinking that we're here, and I just want to remind you that we're not. Okay, like, we are really, really, really not. We're way the heck over here. Okay, it is so early. Everyone in this room is really, truly a pioneer. Okay? We are like little tiny babies trying to figure out what the heck we're doing. We have a long way to go. So the market's gonna go up and down, okay? But the technology, when we talk about the technology, where we are, what we're building, don't get that confused with the market. The technology and the price, they're not related whatsoever. So if you look back at the early days of the internet, we had basically AOL, and it was like this big centralized superpower. And then the Apples and the Googles and the Facebooks and the Amazons, they came in and they started building more open protocols, and they started really revolutionizing the internet. But today, those big centralized companies are now what we need to disrupt, okay? Those are the big centralized things that are now inefficient. And we need to take those centralized forces and decentralize it, so that it can be, that the world, that the user experience, that our data, that our privacy, whatever it is, all of it, okay, can be better.
First, what is this revolution that we're dealing with? At the highest level, we think of it as a few things. The first is an open, immutable, incorruptible record-keeping system. That's a layer that we're seeing built, which is super valuable. The second is Ideally also an open, immutable transaction processing system. So you can process transactions about those records in a very open way, in a very incorruptible and immutable way. And then lastly, and related, is ideally also an open, immutable, secure computation system. So you can write code in an open way, in a transparent way that can be deployed in an unmodifiable fashion, in a very auditable fashion. So secure computation, secure transaction processing, and then this immutable record keeping system. And those, to us at least, those are the kind of fundamental breakthroughs. There are many others, but these are the fundamental breakthroughs that we get really excited about. And from our perspective, this is just like a new fundamental infrastructure layer of the internet. It's a new layer that's been missing from the internet for the last 20 years, and it's now being sort of laid down right as we speak. So in addition to the sort of technical innovation, what makes these really interesting and makes all of this really interesting is that this is sort of a combination of both technology and sort of economic incentives. So economic incentives plus protocols plus network schemes that essentially allow us to operate these global public utilities and global platforms without any central corporation, without any government running them. And as this crosses into the realm of value and value exchange and sort of fundamental record keeping of society, that's pretty powerful.
After I joined Bitcoin, it was like 2010. I started to get pretty involved in like making animated video about it, starting to give a lot of talks about it, and then I also wrote a JavaScript implementation of Bitcoin called Bitcoin.js. And all of that was kind of to try to get Bitcoin more into the mainstream and try to get kind of mainstream adoption. And then in late 2012, I got approached by 𝗕_𝑑 of Mt. Gox fame. And he had just started this new company called OpenCoin, better known now as Ripple. And so I joined them, and then after 𝗕 left, quickly became CTO. And I've been there for 6 years until May of this year. And for most of the last 4 years, my focus has been interledger. And interledger is essentially like an interoperability protocol for payments. It's not necessarily exclusive to blockchain. Like you can interoperate any kind of payment system. You could even use something like handing cash to someone and do interledger over that. So it's pretty flexible, and we got to a point where we're like, interledger is a really big idea. It's like a really important idea. So we should really bring it out to the world somehow. And what happened in early this year was basically, we got to a point where we would go to conferences, we'd tell people about interledger, they'd be super excited. They'd be like, what can I do with it? Like, can I connect it right now? And we'd be like, well, there aren't really any connectors for it yet. There aren't really any companies, that you can interact with on it. And so the impetus for starting Coil was really to be like the first company that's actually doing stuff with interledger.
Yeah. So I pretty much was I used to be an intern at Ripple, and that was around the time when interledger was first being worked on. And I don't know, I found it sort of really interesting, and I felt like it was one of these things that's going to become a big deal, and so there's obviously a lot of time pressure on those sorts of things, and so I thought it was best to just leave the school thing and work on this interledger stuff. And now, a couple years later, interledger is pretty much around, and so it sort of, I think it falls on us to sort of, lead the way as a company building on interledger.
We are sort of in the pre-shipping container circuit switch days of payments, and we're going to be in the sort of standardized ecosystem world of payments where you can interact with payments in incredibly flexible and powerful ways. And that's going to be a tremendous opportunity for developers to be able to sort of complete that triangle of the physical delivery of goods, the exchange of information, and the movement of money. If I can't pay you for a service, there's really not as much point in you providing it to me. And if we can complete that triangle, that's when we'll really see an explosion. And that doesn't work for things that people want to do with payments today. So what doesn't it work for? Imagine if you're a Seagate or an Amazon or an Airbnb or an Uber. These companies all make large numbers of small payments. Amazon has thousands of merchants that they make payments to. Uber, if you're in the Philippines and you're a driver and you need money for milk, Uber would love you to drive for them and buy milk right that day. But they need efficient payments. They need payments that are as reliable as email for that to happen. And that doesn't exist. And each of these companies employs literally hundreds of people just in their payment division. And if you imagine if you ran a payment company, you would love to go to any of these new corporates and say, hey, fire your hundreds of payment people, we'll do all your payments. But there's nobody who can do that. And so if you imagine if I want to start a regional competitor to Airbnb, let's say I want to do Airbnb just in the Boston area, but I want to take incoming payments from all around the world. The solution can't be that I hire 100 payment engineers to make that business work. That can't be the right solution. So this is going to change. This is broken, and someone is going to fix it, and this is a tremendous opportunity. One of the things that I want to see in this space is I want to see smart people like going into this space and working on interesting projects. If you look, there was a time when the cool people worked at Apple. And then there was a time when like the cool people kind of worked at Facebook, and then they kind of moved to Uber, and they move like that's where it's exciting. That's where like when you're out of college, like that's the thing that you want to work on. And like I want blockchain to be the thing that the smartest people really want to work on, and so that we get these people who can develop these great ideas. So CODIUS is kind of something that we incubated at Ripple. It's a smart contract platform that isn't tied to any particular blockchain. It's a completely neutral smart contract platform. And one unique property it has is that it can keep a secret. And that's extremely important because a smart contract that can keep a secret can interact with the Bitcoin blockchain. It can sign transactions. It can interact with the Ethereum. It can interact with the XRP ledger. It can interact with even conventional banking systems. It can interact with web pages, things that Ethereum smart contracts can't do. Absolutely, we've been engaged with regulators for some time. If you talk to people in this space, they'll tell you like the biggest obstacle to adoption or the biggest obstacle to business development is regulatory uncertainty. And there's only two ways to fix that: engage with regulators or engage with courts. And I think we would all agree, I hope, that the regulator option. So you cannot put your head in the sand on this. If the biggest drag on adoption is regulatory uncertainty, then the only way to fix it, other than risking going to jail, is to talk to regulators. And so we put Zoe Cruz on the board, Ben Losky. We engage with regulators all the time. We travel around the world. We educate them.
that really has the opportunity to put its own dent in the universe.